The Bible that many people use today is not the Bible used by the majority of people down through history, or even still today. And by the end of this series, we'll even consider the evidence of whether the New Testament authors themselves used a different Bible. One of the biggest modern misconceptions about the Bible is that we're all talking about the same collection of books when we use the word Bible. Imagine what sounds like the setup for a joke. A Jewish rabbi, a Catholic priest, and a Baptist preacher walk into a bookstore and ask for a Bible. They would all be wanting a different collection of books, although their Bibles do in fact share many books in common. But have you ever thought about how there are even more denominations today who have even different book lists of what they believe belongs in the Bible? And have you ever considered what the most popular Bible today is? The answer may surprise you. First, let's consider several modern views of what the Bible consists of. Then we'll complicate things even more by considering the extensive history of beliefs about what books belong in the Bible, and how these changed over the last couple of millennia. And then by the end of this series, we'll consider whether there is any evidence that the actual New Testament writers relied on texts not found in modern Bibles. Before we go any further, I want to make clear that I'm not going to argue for any Bible over another. This is simply an analysis of what people believe and have believed down through history. My experience is that most people have never considered how they can know what books are canon. My goal here is to simply get people to realize that most believers have accepted canon based on nothing more than tradition. All right, let's start with the most well-known Bibles, then work our way up to the larger ones. Modern Jews and Protestants pretty much agree on the Hebrew Bible, although they group the books differently. The Jewish Bible groups some books together, such as 12 of the shorter prophets, so they have a 24-book Bible. But the Protestant Bible's 39 Old Testament books are in essence the same collection of accepted books. Of course, Protestants have 27 more books than the Jewish Bible, which comprise the New Testament. These were quite an addition all at once in the first century. Also interesting is that many Christians follow some laws found in the Hebrew Bible, while considering others to not be applicable to them. In later studies, we'll examine ways that some groups can view books as sacred or divine and yet not follow their teachings. Of course, most folks have heard of the Bible that the Catholics use, which contains 7 more books, as well as additions to Daniel and Esther. These are sometimes called the Apocrypha. Another, maybe less theologically loaded term for these books is Deuterocanon, which is from the combination of 2 Greek words meaning second and rule or law. So basically, a second law. But we still have not covered all the most common canons that exist today. By the way, canon is just a word we use for an accepted collection of books. If you're studying literature at university, you might hear about the canon of Western literature, which, by the way, is also debated. So what other Bible canons exist today? Let's not forget the groups of the Orthodox Church from the East, which comprise a majority Christian view over a substantial portion of the world's surface. Their canon includes all the books we've discussed so far, plus 5 or 6 more books than the Catholic Bible, depending on how you count. Some of their material can be found appended to other books in some Catholic Bibles. But wait, there's more. People's beliefs differ just like their cultures do, and often those beliefs and cultures vary significantly across something as simple as geography. Let's consider briefly the major continents surrounding Palestine where the Bible was born. We've covered beliefs about the canon in the West, which before the Reformation was primarily Catholic, a history we'll come back to in a moment. In the East, it was the Orthodox Church, but let's look south to another continent. What is the one historically independent perspective among Christians in Africa regarding which canon to use? Well, we finally come to one of the largest canons of all. Although you can find most major denominations all over the world today, one of the major families of denominations of Africa that developed independently through history from the earliest days of Christianity have been the Ethiopian Orthodox. Their canon ranges from 81 to 88 books, depending on which group you ask. Many Christians may not take seriously the beliefs about canon from the Ethiopian Orthodox group of churches, since it only has about 40 million members. But let's see what the majority canon actually is. There are around 300 million Eastern Orthodox in the world. Estimates of how many Protestants are in the world ranges from 600 million to 1 billion. But out of these, there are even some Protestant denominations that use the Deuterocanon. But out of all the people in the world who identify as Christians, which is approximately 2.4 billion people, about 1.3 billion, or a little over half, are Catholic. In other words, the Catholic canon is arguably the majority canon. This is even more interesting because if you take a university course on the Hebrew Bible, it typically will not include the Deuterocanon. And if you look at the most popular Bible app, although you can find Bibles that contain the Deuterocanon there, you will not find them in any of the whole Bible reading plans, at least not yet. And if you're wondering if modern Jews might tip the scales in agreeing with the Protestant Old Testament, there are actually relatively very few of them. Based on estimates I've found, there are probably not much more than 16 million people who identify as Jewish. In the next lesson, we'll see that down through history, there was even more variety in the views people had about what books are holy.